If you were here last Sunday, we had the joyous opportunity to celebrate the graduation of two beautiful young women. I know I'm a little bit biased myself, but every time that I'm around young people, like Olivia and Parker and Jared, I think to myself, well, maybe the world is not going to hell in a handbasket. Every time I'm around young people displaying their talents and gifts, I have to also say, though, that kids in high school and college sure are looking younger than they used to. One of the surest signs of having gotten to the age of being officially old is when we find ourselves more and more in conversations that start with something like this. Well, back in the day, or when I was a kid, or, well, we used to be able to, or we used to go, or we used to have. Have you found yourself in more and more of those kinds of conversations lately? Yes. Well, you're old. Let's just face it. In many cases, our remembrances of how much better things used to be may be somewhat tinted rose-colored by selective memories. One of the memories often debated is the notion that we're much more safe today, or we were much more safe in days gone by. That crime has gotten so much worse. Well, the folks who keep crime statistics say that in some respects that's not true. In fact, a few years ago, they told us, just about 2 or 3 years ago, that violent crimes were at a 30-year low, believe it or not. Now, I think it's ticking back up the last couple of years. But it's true without question that we have this perception of being less safe today than in the past. And as a result, we've restricted access to places and people who were previously much more available. So our world today is a world of locked doors and security cameras and gated communities and password-protected entries and photo ID required admittance. Where access restricted. Can someone please take care of that phone? Step out with it, please. Thank you. We're access restricted, aren't we? Places we once went to, we go no more. Places that were once wide open are now locked up tight as a drum. People that we used to be able to meet face to face to talk about an issue, we now press 1, we press 6, we choose option 3, we speak to a computer chipped voice recognition device that doesn't recognize our southern accents, and we've lost access. Ironically, in a world more connected than ever, we are in some ways feeling like we're more isolated and disconnected and alone and afraid. In a world where access once denied is now by law guaranteed, we still have so many who find themselves on the outside looking in. Now, some of you may remember a day when access to certain places was by law denied. You know, that reality hit me in the face a few years back. I was having a conversation with a friend and a church member of a previous church I served. And this gentleman is an African American. And he said to me one day, he said, you know, here I am now a trustee of this church, a church where when I was a kid, I was not allowed to walk on the sidewalk in front of the building. Now, some of you You may remember a time when access to sidewalks and movie theaters and lunch counters and restrooms, water fountains was restricted based on the color of your skin. Well, thank God those days are over.
Amen.
Despite, though, the end of legalized racial segregation and cultural custom-enforced racial segregation, we still have folks who have some difficulty gaining access. Sometimes the door's still shut. In today's world, access denied is most often an economic divide issue. You want to go see a primary care doctor? You don't have insurance? You don't have money? That door ain't going to open. You'd like to live in a decent house in a safe neighborhood with certain resources. Without certain resources or credit scores, your access is denied. Need to have your power turned on? I didn't learn this till I came here. If you need to have your power turned on, it depends on what side of town you live on. Okay, can you please turn that phone off? Thank you. It depends on what side of town you live on. The deposit required is higher if you live in a lower income neighborhood. Did you know that? Duke Power requires a higher deposit for those who live in this neighborhood than in the neighborhood where I live. Some of you know what it's like to have the door shut in your face, or the road blocked on your path, or the way forward become a dead end. And sometimes the barriers are not only ones others have put up before you, but sometimes the barriers are self-constructed. The past. Our past gets sometimes in the way of the future. Accessing the future. In particular, things that we have done in the past, mistakes we've made, sin committed becomes a barrier we think we cannot cross. And those past mistakes and sins, that guilt we carry on our backs, choke off our lives. And they prevent us from access to hope. Hope, which is essential for us to go on from day to day. And so we come to church, hopefully, to find hope, right?
Amen.
But sadly, in some places, even the church has put up barriers. And we find there's no access. The road's closed. The door's shut. We don't have the right password. That was what Jesus was confronting when he challenged the leaders of his own people, his own religion, to open the doors and let folks know that God has not shut the door or closed the road, but God has made a way to life for all of us. Amen. And so the Apostle Paul writes a letter to the church in Rome. You know, Rome was the seat of power in that day. Rome was the Washington, D.C. of their time and culture. Rome was the center of where those who held the keys of access dwelled. But the people to whom Paul was writing in the church of Rome would have been those who had had the doors of access shut in their faces over and over again. They were used to shut doors and blocked roads, both those others did to them and what they had done to themselves. And Paul, in what may be one of the most artful and articulate expressions of who God is and what God has done, says God has made a way. And that way is through Jesus. God has made a way for all of us. All of God's children have been given access to life through grace. Access to hope through grace. Access to peace through grace. What do I mean by grace? I came across this story told by a Lutheran pastor in Atlanta. It would seem that a young lady one day was speeding through a small Georgia town. She was traveling 70 miles per hour in a 55 mile per hour speed zone. And so the police officer pulled her over and he wrote her a ticket that would cost her $100. Well, she didn't have the money to pay it. And she ended up having to go to court over the ticket. In the courtroom, the judge said, "You were found guilty of going 70 miles an hour in a 55-mile-per-hour speed zone. You have to pay $100. And the young lady said, "Well, I'm guilty, but I can't pay it. I don't have $100. "Well, if you don't pay the ticket, we'll have to lock you up for the weekend." I can't pay the ticket, but I don't want to go to jail. Can you please just have mercy on me?" And the judge very matter-of-factly replied, I can't change the law. The law says that you've got to pay $100 or you have to spend the weekend in jail. Those are the rules, and I cannot change the rules. Starting to tear up, the young lady spoke in a small voice. Isn't there something you can do? I can't pay it, but I don't want to go to jail. I don't want to be locked up. Have mercy on me. And the judge looked down on her. He pushed his chair back from the bench. He unzipped his robe, took it off. He went over to the side and he picked up his jacket and he put it on. And he walked down and he stood beside the girl. And he reached in his wallet and he brought out a $100 bill. And he put the $100 bill on the bench, took off his jacket, then went over and picked up his robe. He zipped up his robe, got back behind his bench. "Young lady, you've been found guilty of going 70 miles per hour in a 55-mile-per-hour speed zone. The law is the law. I can't change it. The law says you must pay $100 or spend the weekend in jail." But I see somebody else has already paid the penalty.
Thank you, God.
Pastor William Flipping says, God saw us speeding down the highway of sin. He zipped down the independent use of his deity and put on the jacket of humanity. He came down. He died on the cross. He paid the price that you and I could not pay. He picked up the tab. He rose from the dead. He zipped up his glorified body and he ascended up into heaven. Now the good news of the gospel is that a bill that we could not pay has already been paid. It's been paid by God in the person of Jesus Christ. Isn't that good news? That we have access, all of us, all of God's children have access, an open door to life through grace. More than anything, that is what I want the core value and the message of this church always to be. We're an open door here. When you come here, I want you to feel as if the door is always open and that love is always available.
Please.
Now that does not mean we won't hold one another accountable. For that's what true love does, right? We're accountable for how we treat one another and the world around us. But when you come here, I want you to know that God has made a way for you to a new life. The door is wide open. The table is set. And it's open. And there's plenty of room for all of us. Let's pray together. Lord, prepare now our hearts to come to your table. And as we come, may we fully open ourselves to your grace, realizing that none of us are here by our own worthiness. None of us are here at this table because somehow we've earned our way here. None of us are here at this table because somehow we're more special than somebody else. We are all here because of your grace.
Yes, Lord.
And so in humility we come to this table, in joy we come, in gratitude we come to receive the gift of your broken body and shed blood and the new life it brings us. In the